Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this latest podcast episode on all things involving E-2 visas. And in particular, we're going to focus on topics related to Canadians looking to relocate to the US. And even if we dive deeper, we're going to focus on electricians and opportunity for electricians, not just Canadians, but we have a lot of Canadian electricians we work with, but you could be from another jurisdiction. But we're going to focus on that. And here to help me again is my colleague, Alexander Verbinski. Alex, how are you doing?
Good. How are you, Charles?
Very good, very good. So I know you've been, people that don't know us, Alex is our business development director, and he's kind of on the front lines working with uh, potential clients, prospective clients, talking to them about their businesses back home. He works a lot with Canadians, himself being a Canadian, but that's not the only reason. And so, Alex, I know you've kind of mentioned just kind of what you've noticed over the last couple, maybe weeks or months, that there's been quite a bit of interest, not only with Canadians looking at E2s, but actually electricians looking to do an E2. Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. So I have, let's say phone calls that are booked with me consistently, and I'm speaking to a lot of trades, okay, in general, and I think the topic of the conversation on electricians and how can we get electricians down here came because yesterday we had a really really good webinar.
Hmm.
On Thursdays we host webinars at noon. And most of the people, I'm telling you, we had like probably 7 attendees, and four of them were electricians, and they owned electrical companies in Canada.
So here's a quick question. I don't know if you know the answer to this, Alex. Is do you know are the licensing standards and requirements, are they the same between Canada and the US, or if you're licensed in Canada, that's automatically accepted in the US? Do you know if that's
In part, yeah, I did some research, and it has to do with the National Electrical Association, something like that. And essentially, National Electrical Code. Okay, so because we're on the same sort of, let's say, power system. Okay, let's say North America
right?
has very similar voltage, wattage. I'm not an electrician, okay, but essentially it's the same. Like I did research, like for UK citizens, it's actually a little bit
Sure.
different to get, let's say, an equivalency license. But for Canadians, if you're a master electrician, you have your red seal. Essentially, you just have to like do a like prove it. So you have your
Hmm.
documentation, and then in some states it depends which state. Okay, you just have to do like a written exam. And like just to know, like I remember I did research, and don't quote me on this, but some states, sort of cover multiple states, right? So if you do an exam in Florida, it'll cover, the +3,
Right.
+4 states,
Yep.
right? Something like that. So yeah, so it's pretty similar, pretty
So it's good to
similar.
know. Yeah, I mean, we're obviously not
Yeah.
experts in electrical, licensing and stuff like that. But that kind of legwork our clients probably do on their own. But from looking at it from a business perspective and from an immigration perspective, I think, and like you said, you do a lot with other tradespeople as well. So it's not just electricians; it could be other contractors, builders,
Yeah.
um, landscapers, stuff like that. That there really are a lot of opportunities. And I have to say, I'm speaking from this side of the border. You're on the other side of the border. Um, I would say there's a shortage in the US. I mean, it depends on the area and the state, but yeah, qualified tradespeople, qualified electricians, plumbers, stuff like that. Maybe you guys have a surplus so you can send over the extras you got because I think we need them down here.
Yeah. I mean, I looked at the stats, just sort of reviewed it. Like, don't quote me, but I mean, you can look it online. Essentially, there's like a steady flow of business in the U.S. It doesn't matter what state you get into on the East Coast. Let's say we're talking to the people from Toronto,
Mhm.
or just Ontario in general, and they typically people move when they move to the states. They move on the same coastline. So. Yeah, there's no shortage. Okay, the stats are that it's relatively trading sideways, I should say, when it comes to the amount of business available. Let's say difficulty, and I think I have the difficulty as well, I must say, okay, is finding that actual black and white between working in the United States, okay, and just sort of going to a
Visiting.
trade
Yeah.
show, right? Like, yeah, right. Like where's that fine line? I could meet with someone, and like I can't negotiate a contract and say handshake
Mhm, mhm.
deal, sign deposit, right? You can't take any deposits because at that point you're working on United States soil. Okay, you received an income. That's a huge no-no, right? But okay, you could discuss and
Mhm.
sort of showcase your company and say, hey, I'll be here in 2 months. I'm like maybe I'm working on that visa or whatnot. Or, we are an active company here. Okay, let's chat later. And then you go back to Canada, and then over the phone you say, hey, let's make a deal, right? That's where the fine
Yeah,
line
and
I
so
think we have
that's a
always
really good
difficulty
point.
explaining.
I got excited with some of the ideas you had, and then I kind of got ahead of myself. So yes, if we're trying to slow roll this out, right? You got to make these expenditures. You don't have the E-2 visa yet. Yeah, if you're a master electrician or any kind of electrician, even if you get some contracts, the Canadian electrician can't come down here and perform that work, right? Until you get the E-2. That's a no-no. That's clearly not going to work. And so that's why, when I mentioned you get some subcontractors, or you mentioned, Alex, they subcontract it out. Okay, it's not going to be as profitable, but look, you can't come down here until you have an E-2 or other, similar visa that gives you the right to perform work in the US. So you'd have to hire some local people until you got the E-2. What is allowable if you just came as a tourist? You certainly can go to trade shows. You can negotiate contracts. I think it's safe to say you could negotiate and sign a contract, on behalf of your US LLC, but you could not, execute the work, right? That's included in that contract. Okay, you're going to do an install on a new residential unit or something. Yeah, you can't perform that work. But I think if you're the owner of the Canadian company, you come to the US, you sign the agreement. I mean, to be super safe,
Take a deposit. What about deposit?
well, the deposit would be paid to the US company, so that's okay, right? Yeah, I mean, if you physically take the
Oh,
check,
okay.
well, I mean, if you take the check, you're at a meeting, you sign the agreement, you take the check, it's written out to the US company, you deposit it in the company's account.
Okay.
That's okay. Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Perfect,
if you wanna be
perfect. I think that
super safe,
this opens everyone's eyes,
yeah,
like, with what's possible, right? Like, is that essentially you can come down, sort of manage and oversee the company, okay? Not necessarily work, right? But you could definitely, like, listen, I think Americans are very, very friendly people, okay? And you could find, let's say, qualified electricians in the States, okay, that are willing to, take and subcontract, or you could subcontract the work to them,
mhm,
right? I don't see any issue with that, and I think that's probably the best way. Even if you're breaking an even, right? Why not?
yeah,
Right? Like, I mean, you're starting out. Yeah, you have a reputation in Canada, okay, but taking that risk in the U.S. with a U.S. company, subcontracting to a licensed electrician, like, no harm, no foul. I had a conversation today with someone that wanted to open up a cleaning company and also a painting company, and I know those businesses. I mean, it doesn't require that much investment,
mhm,
right? Like, I mean, how much does like a floor, like the big machine cost? Okay, with some mops and
right,
some rollers and like even the spray gun stuff. Like max, they're gonna spend like $15,000, right? But you develop relationships, subcontract, even if you're breaking even. Obviously, breaking even with the marketing expenses that you have. Okay, perfect. I mean, you're adding sort of that expenditure, that spent money towards your E-2 visa.
right, yeah, absolutely. So even in this day and age, I mean, how many people physically even go to meetings in person to sign a contract? I mean, most of the stuff you have DocuSign. So again, if you're in Canada, you traveled to the US, negotiated with the principals, but you go back to Canada and you're physically in Canada when you sign the agreement. I mean, even in that case, you're even safer, right, from any kind of claims that you're working illegally. I mean, I think you're always safe, just to make it clearer to our listeners. Uh, you know, the IRS in some cases is pretty liberal, right? And so you're able to make short-term visits to the US to represent, the company, um, and to, negotiate kind of deals. And if the actual contract is signed remotely while you're on Canadian soil, then, I think you're really good. And no one's going to be tracking your trips into the US to say, oh, you came to the US 2 weeks ago, what were you doing here? Stuff like that. Now, as we all know, and anybody who travels, across the border a lot, if you have certain patterns of behavior that start to repeat themselves before, let's say, you get the E-2, that might raise some questions with the officers, right? So if they see that you're coming to the US repeatedly for kind of an extended period, not for just a week or 2, but maybe for 2 months at a crack, and you're doing that over the course of 6 months or so, that might raise some questions like, "Look, buddy, last 6 months, you spent 4 months here. What are you doing?" Again, this is a hypothetical. With most people, it doesn't even come up, but you just need to keep that in mind, that if you are traveling to the US a lot and spending an extended amount of time here, that could raise some questions. But again, they'll ask you questions at the border, and if they bring this issue up, they're usually not gonna clamp down
Um,
right away.
so Charles, here's like a real question that people have. Like people don't necessarily have an issue with coming to the United States and doing all that. What they're afraid of and what they're worried about is number one, like being banned from the states, and let's say an officer saying, "Hey, no, 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 you're actually working on U.S. soil,"
With
right? So they don't even know what to say to the officer when they're, let's say, going through the land or air border crossings, right? Like, what do you tell the officer when you're saying, like, you're going to go visit a job site? What do you mean you're going to go visit a job site? You're going to go, meet with a potential client? What do you mean you're going to meet with a potential client, right? Like,
right,
you're
right.
working,
That's a good
right?
yeah,
So,
good question.
and that's the real, like, that's the real aspect to it, that, like, we say that it's doable, and, we could just say, hey, it's doable, go figure it out. Okay. But I want to give like these people, the sound advice to say, hey, no, listen, this is good. This is what you tell the officer, and you're good. You're good from here.
Well, yeah, there's no, silver bullet because each officer is different, in how they interpret things, but I would say give enough information to address their question. This is a very legalistic lawyer-like answer, but I don't know how else to phrase it. Give them enough information to answer their question without giving too much information, right? So, I would not say something like, "I'm going to a job site," because that sounds like it's an active construction site where work is being done. Why would you go to a site like that if you're not planning to do some work? And you might not be, but again, you don't wanna get yourself in a hole in having to explain things away, because once they're looking for little hooks to that they grab on. You say something, and they might wanna latch onto it and go from there. It's like pulling a thread, and they wanna see where that leads them. So, I would answer their question, but keep it as vague as possible without too many details. So if you're going to a job site, I would say something like, I'm going to meet with potential clients for negotiations, right? Keep it vague. Negotiation
Perfect.
is fine, for a tourist to do. And that's what
Okay.
I say anytime. Anytime if you're crossing the border and they say, "What are you looking to do?" I'd say, I'm going to negotiate with some, potential clients for our Canadian business, right? They don't have to necessarily because it could be true, right? You might have a Canadian business, given the proximity between Canada and the US. Sure, it happens all the time. You got people from Canada, their Canadian company might perform the work. In this case, you've got a US LLC that probably will be doing the work when you get the E-2, but you don't want to mention that, right? And I wouldn't even bring it up. Now,
You don't want to mention it,
yes, you do.
really.
But unless they
Okay.
ask you. So here's the another legalistic answer. You have to always tell the truth, but you don't have to give more information than what's required. So if they don't say the question, "Do you have a US LLC?" I wouldn't volunteer that information. Don't tell them that you have a US LLC. It might even be dormant, but again, the more info you give, then that creates possible questions. But if they do ask you a question, like, "Do you have a US LLC that you own?" You got to be truthful because at that point, if you say no, then you're lying, and later that could come back to bite you. So
Okay. Okay.
you
Got
just
it. So I mean,
truthful, yeah,
it sounds like with regards to the electrical side to things, okay, like if someone was running an online business, okay, from Canada, and then meeting with a potential client for negotiations that's in the States, all good, okay, except electrical stuff, it requires in person, like it requires some of the service, right?
yeah.
I mean, it's fine to say I subcontract out the work, and this is my list of subcontractors, and I've always given them work. It's just, I'm a Canadian company, and I advertise in the States, and I meet with potential clients, right? I think that's safe, right?
Yeah, it's safe, or I wouldn't even maybe don't have to go into that much detail because you might be meeting with a US company that's looking to perform work in Canada, right? Just because 'cause you're coming to the US to meet with a US company doesn't mean that work is going to be performed in the US. Maybe it's a US company that's looking to do something in Canada, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
No?
yeah, no,
Is
I
am
get
I being
it.
too
No,
much
for
like a
sure.
lawyer
It's
here?
just like that. Yeah, it's just that likelihood. I just want to be, let's say,
Right.
yes, there is a chance that that's possible. But these people want to move to the States. I think the people that we're talking to, they want to move to the States. They want to establish themselves. Okay, and the likelihood of that being the case is very, very slim, right? So I think the best advice I'd say, let's say, like the actual steps that someone should take as an electrician that wants to open up an electrical company in the States. okay, is possibly, purchasing that truck, that trailer, or just that, let's say, Sprinter van, fill it up with tools, right? And then, I had this idea of, just a niche business idea of supply and install Tesla chargers at home, right? Very simple, the panel upgrades, depending on like if it's a simple install or you have to do the panel upgrade, long conduit run, all that stuff. Okay. Very niche. You can market it very easily. Okay. And while you're marketing, you could eventually get, let's say, future clientele. Hey, we're busy, we can't do it, but 3 months from now we could do it, right? So
Right.
you sell ahead of time, get some income going in, and then once you get the visa, you made those investments, you bought that truck, you bought all those tools, right? Now you have clients like lined up,
Yep.
right? Your schedule's packed. I think that like that's an amazing sort of example of how you can enter the states, how to make it a smooth transition. You don't necessarily have to move your whole family right away, right?
Mhm.
You could just hop between Canada and the US. Whenever there's business in the US, you fly down, okay, perform 2 3 jobs, okay, and then come back, right?
Right.
Well, obviously once you have the visa, right?
Right.
Anywho, um
Sounds good. No, that's a great plan of
yeah.
action. I think that's a great plan,
Okay.
and I think hopefully, hopefully this was beneficial for our listeners to kind of give them a taste of how to go about doing all this. And I think maybe sometimes people are a little intimidated at the start of the process, like they think this really is complicated, and there are some nuances and complications involved. But fortunately, that's what we're here for. We've been doing this for almost 20 years, and we know all those nuances, and we can distill them down into actionable steps for our clients to make sure we tell them do this, don't do that, and make the transition as easy as possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a daunting looking task, okay, but we're obviously here to help, okay, and you could definitely find the answers that you're looking for, and let's say find peace of mind during a consultation with us, right?
Mhm.
So if you're listening to this, I'm sure there's going to be a link in the description to book a consultation directly with our E2 department or directly with Charles, just to sort of go over, your plans and how we could formulate your business and then get you down in the States as soon as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so everybody, next steps. Anybody listening to this and interested in taking next steps, we've got contacts in the description below, and you can reach out to either Alex or anybody else on the staff to discuss first steps. Make sure more or less you've got a business model that would is suitable for an E2. And believe me, E2s are really flexible. Most businesses qualify for an E2, and so whether you're an electrician or a plumber, anything like that. Have an initial conversation with Alex, do an initial screening, and we might not even need to have a full-blown consultation with me or one of the other attorneys. We could just get you going, right away and get you down to the States. And it's not as difficult as you might think.
Right on.
Sounds good.
Perfect.
All right. Thanks,
Charles,
Alex.
thank
Thanks
you
for
so
your
much.
time. We'll see you next time.
See ya. Bye bye.
Thanks.